All right, so I just came back from the gym, and we need to talk about the employment data that just came out. Okay, the employment data came out. We got 236,000 non-farm payroll employment increment in March. Okay, we're expecting about 250,000 or so. Okay, so this is actually a lesser than expected, which means hiring is starting to slow down a little bit. Okay, let's go through this a little bit. So let me just move myself a little bit over here. So you can see unemployment rate changed a little bit at about 3.5%, basically the same. You can see that unemployment rate basically started to went all the way down. Okay, back in 2021 and basically at the start of the end of 2020 at the start of 2021, we were seeing an unemployment rate at about 6.5%, pretty high. Right now, we are starting to stabilize back down to about the 3.5% mark. We hope to be about the 3% mark. That would be the best. Okay, but if we were to actually go down too much, what that actually entails is that to the Federal Reserve, oh, you see, we can actually hike rates a lot more, so let's just hike up the rates a little bit. Since, we're not that worried, unemployment is not going out of control, everyone has a job, we can increase more rates. That's kind of what the whole narrative is about when we talk about unemployment. Okay, because like I said, okay, when we have the Federal Reserve, they only have a dual mandate, which is keeping inflation down, possibly at 2% year over year, and also maximum employment. They want to get that number down as much as possible, which is why Jerome Powell was getting destroyed by Congress, by the White House, by anyone possible in 2020 to 2021. He was getting destroyed left and right. Everyone wanted his head because we are looking at this much. You can see it over here yourself. 6% back in 2021. Okay, so yeah, it was hard for Jerome Powell without a doubt. Okay, so you can see over here, number of unemployed person at 5.8 million changed little in March. Okay, because very little net movement since the early 2022. Let's just go through some of the numbers just so that we are a little bit more in tune with it. Major worker group unemployment rate for Hispanic decreased to 4.6% in March. Unemployment rates for adult men 3.4, adult women 3.1, teenagers 9.8, whites 3.2, blacks 5%, Asian 2.8. So yeah, pretty alright. I think there's not much change in general from the last month as well. Permanent job losers increased by 172,000 to 1.6 million in March. The re-entrance to the labor force declined by 182,000 to 1.7 million. I think this one is a little bit more concerning because people what it actually means is that people who basically lost their jobs were unable to actually get back into the force. Chances are these are the people who got taken over by AI or taken over due to the fact that the job don't really need as much people anymore. They found ways to be more efficient in the job. They found ways to be more efficient without as much people. Okay, so declined about 182,000. I do expect this number to actually go up over the years. Chances are we might actually slowly see about 2.5 to even 3 millions in about 3 million. I would assume about 3 million in the next 10 years or so. So yeah, I'm not gonna be too surprised about it. Okay, so long-term unemployed, jobless for 27 weeks or more, little changed. I think this is good to see that there's not much change in the long-term unemployed, because if we do see a long-term unemployed having higher numbers, it simply means that 28 weeks ago a lot of people were getting laid off. So chances are what would actually happen where we want to see this number, well, for example, if we do see this number go up, it's most likely in about another half a year where all the massive layoff that happened in the tech industry happened. We do not know if those people would actually go towards the long-term unemployed, because do understand that even when we're talking about the tech industry, okay, we're talking about people who effectively are very, very smart. People are very, very efficient in whatever they do. They would have no problem finding a job elsewhere. But do understand that when they are doing a mass layoff, you're also talking about those people who are doing the front end, people who are doing sales, people who are not just doing all the IT stuff, people are not doing all the data stuff. People could be in the front line, people could be the salesperson, people could be those entry level positions, those could also be part of the layoffs as well. And those people who are getting laid off from the front lines might not be so easily accessible towards a re-entry to any other jobs, for example. Okay, so we probably will need about another half a year before we actually see any sort of numbers get added to this long-term unemployed. But even then, we wouldn't really know for sure. I think labor force participation rate at 62.6%. This is good. I think where back in before the whole COVID situation, it was actually about like 65% or so. So right now we're starting to see a huge uptrend continuing upwards. Okay, so the employment population ratio edged up over the month to 60.4%. Yada yada. Let's see, part-time for economic reason unchanged. Not in labor force who currently wants a job also remain unchanged at 44.9 million in March, returned to its February 2020 level. So yeah, I think that people who are not in the labor force who still wants a job, this effectively is just talking about the whole employment situation. I think this one as a whole would take up the biggest part of the whole employment situation, in my own opinion. All right, but anyway, let's talk about how this would actually affect the Federal Reserve. Okay, because unemployment rate in general, this whole entire data that we actually just got, means that hiring is basically coming down a little bit. Okay, we're starting to see hiring cooling off. Okay, so what does that actually entails? It means that the whole wage price spiral, chances are that is already completely out of the building. Okay, people were actually that worried about wage price spiral. I believe about 3 meetings ago, people actually actively bringing it up to Jerome Powell during the FOMC Q&A, asking him what would actually be what are the Feds actively doing to actually prevent such a case from happening, because the wage, if we do get a wage price spiral, which is inflation going out of control, and because the inflation goes out of control, people who are working they need more money to go through their life, and they ask for a raise, and then the company have to raise the price, and because the company have to raise the price again, that kind of just contribute to inflation, and you just get this spiraling effect. Okay, Jerome Powell, back then, he was actually saying that it's not that much of a concern, but right now I think that with more and more reports to actually back up the fact that hiring is starting to slow down a little bit, should actually just throw that concern out the window immediately. But of course, you never know, because if inflation do not get anchored down quickly, we might not really know what would happen, because oil prices can actually go out of control. Okay, like I said before, in my previous video about OPEC, okay, where they're actually cutting down the supply of oil. If OPEC were to cut down the supply of oil, and if US being one of, well, basically the biggest, the country with the biggest need and demand for oil, okay, when US starts to buy oil at a higher rate, inflation is going to be happening all over again. And let's not forget, oil is actually at the top of the chain. Okay, because how oil actually works is that higher prices for oil means higher prices for logistics in general. Okay, it's going to be your deliveries, it's going to be your freight ships, it's going to be down to your trucks, your people who are doing in the middle part of it. Prices go up, it means these people would need higher wages to cover the oil prices, for example. And if this actually happens, that means that the companies will have to charge more for all the products, for example, because it doesn't matter what company they are talking about, all of them needs oil. Okay, you look at the Fortune 500, I don't care, every single one of those companies require oil. Okay, unless you're talking about a company that completely works as software as a service, if they're purely doing SaaS, then yeah, those apart. But if you're talking about your Apple, your Amazon, you're talking about any of those sort of companies out there, yeah, all of them are using oil pretty heavily. Okay, and if they're using oil pretty heavily, it also means that inflation might not really anchor properly, and that would actually cause inflation to maybe spiral out of control. But of course, I don't want to be the person that's trying to tell you that the world is ending because of hyperinflation. It's not the case. I don't think that is the case. But after successfully bringing inflation, well, I won't really call it success, but we managed to bring inflation down towards the 6% mark, hopefully in the 5% region in the next few months or so. finally getting back to the 5% region and then starting to have such a problem, we might actually start to see a plateau for inflation. And if we actually start to see a plateau for inflation, that's not going to be good for anyone. Okay, it means that all these rising prices are starting to find a stability point where they're gonna just stop rising as much. It's not as if they're going down in price. So, for example, if you used to pay $1 for something, now you're gonna be paying to $1.50, and it's not gonna go back to $1. Okay, even with competitive markets, with capitalism doing its thing, it's not gonna bring the prices back down, and that's my concern for why this whole thing actually entails. Okay. So I'm not sure what the Federal Reserve is going to do. A lot of people are actually starting to report, such as Bloomberg, is reporting that there is a good chance that the Federal Reserve might actually increase rates again in the upcoming FOMC, which is going to be happening in May. Okay, I don't know. There's a very very good chance. I believe that even for the next upcoming SEP, I don't know. There's a good chance that we might actually see a revision upwards for the FFR, which is the federal funds rate. I do believe that that would easily be one of a possibility. But anyway, that's all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.